You can go to the grocery store and you may buy a cut of beef that says product of the USA, but that does not mean that it is a product of the USA.
If I'm buying a product on the bottom it says made in China or made in, whatever it is, I also kind of want to know where my meat is coming from. Why is it such a big deal where people are giving a pushback of where the meat is coming from?
Sonny Perdue, our Secretary of Agriculture, head of the United States Department of Agriculture, has done more harm to the agricultural industry as a whole than any other Secretary of Agriculture in the history of our nation. JBS is both owned by the Batista family. Josely and Wesley are the two brothers that are heads of that corporation. And those brothers just got out of prison in Brazil for fraud and unfair trade practices in their country. Let's say you're ordering a hamburger from McDonald's. Likely it's not American.
The consumer says, is the meat good? Is it healthy for my kids? Is it gonna be cheap? Check, I'm good to go. Why should I, the consumer, be so concerned about what's going on?
There's an oligarchy of power and control at the top of the chain, right? And that trickles down to you. So they are able to eliminate competition in the United States while bringing in cheaper, lower quality meat from other countries, 18 other countries, and they can put that on top of our meat, mix it in the grind or mix it in, you can go to the grocery store and you may buy a cut of beef that says product of the USA, but that does not mean that it is a product of the USA. So basically what I'm telling you is, as a consumer, you don't know what you're buying. You don't know the food safety because every country has different safety inspection standards, right? Now they do have to go through a United States inspection standard, but it's not up to par as what we have inland here. So how it affects you is you're getting a lower quality product at maybe a higher price because they, as a consumer, is at a higher price, but that ability for them to import that cheaper cut of meat, throw it into the American product, it oppresses our prices because there's no competition for it. Mandatory country of origin labeling was implemented, I think, in 2002, somewhere around in there. And what that did was it required our processors to put a country of origin label on all beef. So that means you were able to differentiate your beef as a consumer in the retail store. What happened is Canada and Mexico decided that mandatory cool violated several trade agreements, and so they went to the World Trade Organization and a lawsuit came about. The World Trade Organization determined that it was unfair trade practices by the United States to require mandatory country of origin labeling. Canada and Mexico won that lawsuit, and Congress repealed mandatory cool in 2015.
As a buyer myself, I kind of would want to know where it's coming from. I don't think it's a big deal to say, if I'm buying a product on the bottom it says made in China or made in, whatever it is, I also kind of want to know where my meat is coming from. Why is it such a big deal where people are giving a pushback of where the meat is coming from?
Okay, that becomes a very complicated issue. So obviously the main four packing conglomerates, or that oligarchy, do not want to have to differentiate that meat. They say it's too expensive to do that, to differentiate it in the packing plants. So those processors are members of the board of directors of what we call the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, a very strong cattle industry lobbying group. And so they have determined that mandatory cool is bad for the consumer and bad for the cattle business. The organization called RCAF USA is an organization full or comprised of independent producers across the United States, almost 6,000 members. And they believe mandatory cool is an individual right, is a liberty issue. And so they're the ones that have been, and I'm a part of that group, and we have spent years and years pushing that because we believe, number one, it's a liberty issue, and number two, the data shows that at the prime of when Congress repealed Cool, we were in the prime of the industry. But the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, they are against mandatory country of origin labeling. They are very pro-export, very pro-packer, and to me, it's kind of a pay-to-play system. The packers pay them, sit on the board of directors, and then they get to play. They're required to play how the packers want.
How many people like you, cattle ranchers, how many of you are there in America?
700,000.
We went from 1.2 to 1.3 million to 700,000 today from 1979.
That's correct.
How many of these 700,000 you think are going to be able to withstand the current challenges they're facing?
We could lose, through this COVID situation, we could lose plus 1/3 of those this year.
You could lose a third, so we can go from 700,000 to 450,000 in the next 6-7 months.
It is possible, maybe more. Sonny Perdue, our Secretary of Agriculture, head of the United States Department of Agriculture, has done more harm to the agricultural industry as a whole than any other Secretary of Agriculture in the history of our nation. We have lost over 50% of our net farm income under his watch. He's a globalist.
You even heard JBS was trying to buy National Beef back in 2009, and that would have been a whole big monopoly, and JBS is a Brazilian-based company, which makes no sense.
JBS and National Marfrig are both Brazilian-owned. JBS is both owned by the Batista family. Josley and Wesley are the two brothers that are heads of that corporation. And those brothers just got out of prison in Brazil for fraud and unfair market or trade practices in their country. They just got out of prison. Both of those boys spent a year in prison for fraud. In 2017, JBS were importing Brazilian beef. They sent it all over the world. Rotten meat. They got caught in that scandal. It is a food safety issue like no other. When 2 of our 4 main beef packers are Brazilian-owned, foreign-owned, and they have that much power, and they've been caught in these fraudulent cases in their own countries, what do you think they're doing in the United States, right? They don't care about the American consumer. This is a corruption. And when people say, Shad, what would you do to change the industry? I start at the top and I say, we got to end corruption. Mandatory Cool becomes a liberty issue because it's a law that provides freedom and liberty to the consumer to make a choice. That we've created law from the beginning of our country to enable the consumer to have choice, right? So that's a good law. But these other laws that they want to implement, such as the beef checkoff, is the $1 tax. That's taxation without representation, as far as I'm concerned. Radio frequency identification tags in these cattle, what that is a chip that goes into the cow. They want to know about it from birth to plate. That actually inhibits liberty and freedom to the producer because it's a private property rights issue, right? So they want to know everything you're doing. There's these new measures called the global roundtables. And let's take the specific one that I know deeply about is called the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And what that was created by the United Nations. They implemented this control mechanism called the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. They implemented it across the world through the World Wildlife Fund. The World Wildlife Fund is an environmental organization that does not believe in private property rights. They're a very enormously money-driven organization that wants to take you off your land. So they have implemented this deal called the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and it controls production standards from top to bottom. These are communistic methods, and you are going to adhere to their production standards from top to bottom, or you're not going to be in the system. Go to a high-end steakhouse in Fort Worth. That's going to be American beef. I mean, there's probably no question to that. But then if you get down into the chain steakhouses, there might be a question to it. I'm hopeful that is all American beef, and I think it is. But then when you go, let's say you're ordering a hamburger from McDonald's, likely it's not American beef.